Hey guys, welcome to my 29-week update. So I want to warn you in advance, it's going to be a pretty long video most likely because a lot has happened this week. So let's get on to that. The app says that the baby's about the size of an acorn squash this week. Alright, so let's just get into it. This week I ended up having to stay in the hospital overnight. A couple of weeks ago, this thing happened where basically I started having Braxton Hicks and they wouldn't go away. And they were irregular but pretty frequent. And so I called my midwife and we were able to stop them through a bunch of different things that we tried, and everything turned out okay. Well, that started to happen again this past Sunday. It's Wednesday today. And I remembered what we had done last time to stop the contractions. And so I went ahead and started doing all of those things. So I rested, I was making sure to drink lots of electrolytes and water. I was very, very hydrated. I tried taking a bath. I tried taking a nap. I just kind of sat and rested and put my feet up. And none of these things were working. And so I went ahead and decided to make a call to my midwife and just see kind of what she was thinking. I went ahead and made a call to my midwife, and I had been timing the contractions, and so I was able to send her a screenshot of the app I was using so she could kind of look through and see about when they were coming. And at this point, I believe they were extremely irregular, coming anywhere between 2 minutes apart to typically less than 7 minutes apart. They were anywhere in the range from 2 to 7 minutes apart. And she didn't really like that. That's too many contractions to be having, even if they're just Braxton Hicks. And so she had me get Pedialyte specifically because that seemed to help last time. I've been drinking coconut water for electrolytes, but she wanted to see if Pedialyte specifically would help. And had me take another Epsom salt bath and time them for another hour. And so I timed them, and after that hour I called her back, and really nothing had changed. And so she went ahead and felt like it was time for me to go into the birth center and be monitored. And so we get to the birth center and we did a checkup. Basically, it was just like a prenatal. She took all my vitals, she checked my urine to make sure there was nothing in there. And then, unlike my normal prenatals, she also went ahead and checked my cervix. And luckily, everything was still closed. She said it felt like exactly how it should at that point in time, at 28 weeks and 5 days. That's how far along I was when this happened. And we then moved into another room, and she stuck me on a monitor to track my contractions and also to track the baby's heartbeat to make sure he was doing okay. Just to hop back really fast, my vitals and my cervix, everything looked good. Everything looked perfect, exactly how it's supposed to. We were monitored for 30 minutes, and my midwife came back in. If I remember correctly, the contractions were showing up. They were still irregular, but they were showing up typically between 3 to 5 minutes apart, which again is too close together. It's more like active labor. And she had asked me kind of how they felt and where they were coming from. And the contractions for me were coming from the side and moving forward instead of from the front and moving back. And she said that was a little indicative of real labor contractions, not just Braxton Hicks. She said that Braxton Hicks typically will start up the front by your belly button and move out. So with all of this going on, she definitely started to be a little more unsure and a little bit more concerned than she had initially. When I first went in, it seemed like it was, nothing really concerned her too much. She just wanted me to go in to make sure. And after seeing me on the monitor for 30 minutes, she still wasn't horribly concerned, but it was just a little bit more like, I don't like that. And so she gave me some more magnesium. It was pure magnesium powder, and I just drank that really fast. And she went ahead and she put me back on the monitor for 30 more minutes. At this point in time, it's probably 1 in the morning, so we're all tired. Luckily that she was the midwife on call at the time, and she was at the birth center because there was another woman giving birth at the moment. She kind of just left us to do our own thing and to hang out while she took care of this other mom and just kind of hung out. After that 30 minutes, the second 30 minutes, so by this point I'd been monitored for about an hour, and a little bit more than an hour, and she came back, and the contractions had really not changed at all. The magnesium had pretty much no effect. I did notice immediately after I took it, those like first 5 contractions after I took the magnesium, it was a little bit slower and less intense, but still just too much. And very quickly went back to exactly how it had been. So she wasn't super comfortable with that again, and she started to mention calling her backup OB and just asking him about what he thought. And ultimately what she decided to do was not call him that night, because this particular doctor works with all of the midwives in the area, and he really, really trusts them. And if, basically the way she said it to me was, if the midwives were calling him unsure, he was immediately going to ask for them, the patient, to come in, because these midwives are very knowledgeable and they can handle stuff. And if they need to call the doctor, it means it's past what they can handle, and the person needs to go in. And so she decided not quite to reach that point just yet, especially because if she would be calling him, it would be at like 1 in the morning, which would bring up even more concern for him, just not knowing any information about what was going on, just the fact that she would be calling him at 1 in the morning. So we went back into her office and she did another cervical check, and nothing at all had changed. And so that kind of, I think, eased all of our minds a little bit. And so she went ahead and sent me home for the night to get some rest. And she told me she would be checking on me the next day. At this point, it's like 2 in the morning. So Michael and I immediately went to bed. I took some Benadryl. My midwife told me to, so I could get some sleep. And unfortunately, it didn't really do much of anything for me. I didn't sleep well that night. I got maybe 4 hours of sleep. And then I had to wake up in the morning, and the little girl I watched was dropped off, and Michael went off to work. Well, he was with me that morning. We just kind of hung out, and I continued to just really rest and not do a whole lot. I was timing contractions and everything, and for probably the first hour after I woke up, the contractions were a little bit less than they had been the night before. But within that first hour, they quickly picked back up to exactly how they were the previous night, Sunday night. So my midwife called me probably around 11 o'clock, and so much happened in such a short period of time that I'm a little bit fuzzy on some of the details. So I'll do my best just to be as detailed and keep it all together as possible. And I let her know that things really were pretty much the exact same they had been. And she decided at that point she was going to talk to the other midwife in the practice. I see both of them. And the way this office works is just 2 midwives, and they alternate the days they're on call. And so I see both of them, and whoever's on call when I go into labor will be the one that attends my birth. And so I'm very comfortable with both of them. They're both absolutely wonderful. I love them both. But this one particular midwife, because she had been with me at the very beginning, like on Sunday when I was going through these contractions, and she was the one that monitored me. She was the one that she decided she really wanted to keep up with it, and so she was the one that was going to be checking up on me even though she was no longer on call. And she decided what she was going to do was consult with the other midwife in the practice and see what this other midwife thought and see if they could think of anything else to try. And she also mentioned she was more than likely going to be calling her backup OB just to get another opinion, see what he wanted to do, because at this point, something in her gut was telling her that I needed to be seen by this doctor. And I needed to be seen more than just what they could do for me. And honestly, at this point, Michael and I both were like, you know what? I think I'm totally fine. We both felt like I was 100% okay. And I would be just fine just hanging out. I just needed to take it easy. So a couple hours later, after talking with the other midwife, she went ahead and called me again. And by this point, It's probably 1 or 2. This was right before she was calling the doctor, and she was like, you know what, I'm definitely going to call him, and just in case he wants you to go into his office, I need you to contact your husband and get him home from work so he can go with you if you go. She wanted to know if I would be available to go into his office on that day because his office closed in just a few hours. I let her know that the little girl I watched wasn't going to be picked up for another, at that point I think it was about an hour until she would be picked up. And so she was like, okay, that's fine, I'll let him know. And so she hung up with me, and she called, and while she called, I texted my husband, and I let him know what was going on, and that we would more than likely be going to the doctor's office, and there was a possibility that the doctor would be sending us to the hospital to L&D, labor and delivery, to be monitored. Very soon after that, she called me back, and she said, hey, just so you know, the doctor wants to see you pretty much immediately. As soon as you can get in, you need to go in. And so I was like, okay, we can do that. As soon as this little girl gets picked up, my husband's already on his way. I can meet him at the hospital if I need to, or at the doctor's office if I need to, and I will head that way as soon as I'm ready. The little girl was picked up, and while I was waiting for her to be picked up, I went ahead and started packing a little bag because I assumed it was going to be another late night, and so I went ahead and packed like my water, my Pedialyte, a couple of snacks, and my glasses because I wear contacts. I packed my glasses in contact solution in a contact case so I could change out and be comfortable for the long night. My husband just so happened to conveniently get to the door right as the little girl's dad did, and so she was able to go home. My husband was able to pack just a couple of things for himself. I think he packed like some snacks because he assumed it was going to be a late night as well. I was able to get a super fast shower, and then we immediately headed to the doctor's office. Immediately they took me back. They took my vitals. They got brief history about like my pregnancy, like my due date and last menstrual period and stuff like that. And they tested my urine just to make sure I didn't have protein or anything going on in my urine. They took me back to be stuck on the monitor because it was so late and he was about to close his office. He wanted to make sure I had time to be monitored. And so he stuck me on the monitor, and really funny story, kind of going off on a tangent a little bit. The woman that was there connecting me to the monitor spent probably 5 minutes trying to find the baby's heartbeat, and he kept moving. She could not get a steady heartbeat at all just because he kept moving. And the doctor came in and he was like, you know what, if anything, that's a good sign. We know he's healthy because he's moving around, and with real labor, babies slow down. They stop moving as much. So it's a good sign. And he was like, don't worry about getting the baby's heartbeat right now, we just need to see the contractions. And so they left me, he said 15 minutes. I think it was closer to 5 to 10 minutes, to be totally honest with you. It was not long at all. And probably right around 10 minutes. And he popped his head back in and looked at the contraction monitor, and he was like, wow, yep, you're popping those contractions out. And I thought they were about every 2 to 3 minutes apart. Still fairly kind of irregular, but pretty regular at this point. Come to find out later, they were actually 1 to 2 minutes apart. I didn't realize that. He took me back into his office. He also did a cervical check. There was still no progress, which was good. He basically explained to me that he was going to send me to the hospital overnight. His plan was, he really wasn't concerned about me actually going into labor at that moment. What he was more concerned about was the effects of the contractions on the baby for the future. So the way he explained it to me was that the contractions, even though my body is not preparing for labor at all, which is fantastic, every time your uterus contracts, it cuts off blood flow to the placenta. Now, the baby's body is made to handle that because the baby has to go through labor as well. That wasn't the issue. The issue was too much of that for too long can start to deteriorate the placenta and stunt the baby's growth and health. Even though he wasn't really concerned about me going into labor at that moment, his plan was to send me to the hospital overnight and stick me on a medication called Precardia. Now this medication is actually for high blood pressure. It's supposed to lower your blood pressure, but they have found that it works very well at stopping contractions and stopping preterm labor. He did explain to me the difference between preterm labor and preterm contractions. I was just having preterm contractions. They were not doing anything to actually open my cervix, so they were not, therefore I was not in preterm labor. Anyway, because this medicine can lower your blood pressure, and I have had slightly on the lower end blood pressure anyway, he wanted me to be in the hospital for the night so they could monitor my vitals and make sure I was handling the medication okay. That was kind of shocking. I was not expecting that at all, and it was a little bit intimidating. I am not a fan of hospitals. I don't hate them, but I don't like them, and I've never spent the night in a hospital. And at this point, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of was like, what does this mean? Like, does this mean things are bad? Does this mean I need to worry? Is the baby okay? Am I going to go into preterm labor? At this point, my mind is just racing. I didn't know what was going on exactly. I was just worried. I was trying my best to just stay calm. And pretty much that meant, you know, not really thinking about things, just taking it as it came. Michael and I immediately headed over to the hospital, and they put me in the antepartum ward. This antepartum ward is specifically for women who have issues while they are pregnant. And basically it's just a bunch of women who are in preterm labor, unfortunately. As heartbreaking as that is, it's necessary. We went through and registered with the hospital, and then we were put in a room, and immediately I had to put on a gown, and they strapped me up to monitors, and I hung out in the bed. And that's about how the next 24 hours went. It was just me in the bed. What the monitor was finding was that my contractions were about 1 to 2 minutes apart and lasting on average about 1.5 minutes. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with contraction monitors, but it also measures the intensity and tightness of the contraction. And it goes up on the screen, it's just a little number, and it starts out at 0, and then as your stomach tightens, it'll go up, 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 and the number will increase up to the highest number is 100. But women can top that out while they're having contractions. It's just that's the highest the number actually goes. My contractions at their worst point reached up to the 70s in the tightness. So on their scale, my contractions were hitting about 70% of the full intensity that their scale would pick up. So they were very intense. Because they were 1 to 2 minutes apart, I really did not feel any break in between pretty much. I had what felt like 2 seconds in between every single contraction. And while they were not actually painful, they were so intense and so tight